All right, let's get started. Welcome, everyone, to our webinar on filtration and flow control basics. We're also going to cover details on advanced porous metal media for field safety and process control applications. We've got some seasoned engineering veterans speaking with us today. We have Chris Christos, who's a applications engineer at Mott. His background is in material science and metallurgy and has around 16 years of experience helping customers find solutions for their technical needs. Chris, I believe, has designed thousands of porous metal solutions for customers and industries over that time period. Chris, do you want to say a quick hello?
Hello, this is Chris Christos.
And next we have Al Morena, also an application engineer with around 4 years of experience at Mott, designing several hundred custom components throughout that time. Al comes to us from the valves market, making his total experience in flow control engineering around 30 years or more. Al, do you want to say hello?
Hi, everyone. Al Morena here.
All right. And I am Sean Kane. I head up the product management group here at Mott. So let's go ahead and get started. Just a quick background on Mott. So we've been around for around 60 years with a track record of making products for the most demanding Fortune 100 companies. You know, people like NASA, Samsung, Medtronic, you name it. We've got the largest installed base of porous metal filters and flow control in the world, and you know, which our products go in anywhere from the Mars rover out in space and on Mars to implantable medical devices that physically go inside your body. We have the most extensive metal alloy selection that covers the toughest operating conditions, and we're expanding materials every day. So we're customizing new alloy mixtures and new materials each day. And lastly, we've got a customer innovation center that's a hub for industry-leading innovation, where we can actually take what you need out in the field, simulate it in the lab, and provide you data and results confirming the different applications. And we also have additional capabilities like 3D printing and various additive porous manufacturing technology. So cutting edge going on in the center. All right, just a quick look at our agenda today. Our objectives are to review the principles of filtration, flow control, and flame arresting. We're going to go into some significant technical details here. Then we want to understand a little bit more about the technology in porous metal and what it's capable and where it's applied. Then we're going to go into the details of the safety in the field safety applications, as well as various process control applications, and touch on some of the next generation development and design capabilities happening in the world today regarding the technology. And we'll wrap up. Just a few comments going into the webinar. So many of our customers have very confidential applications. So as far as asking questions during the webinar, you can click the button below, and we will respond immediately after the webinar to those questions via email. You can also download various resources and documents during the webinar as well. And before we forget, through June, we're offering free technical workshops on site with our engineering teams to have one-on-one sessions so we can review, especially existing customers and potentially new customers. If you qualify, please contact a Mott representative. This is a fantastic experience, and it's basically you got an extension of your team who's capable of designing what you need right on site with your engineers. We've got pretty rave reviews over our workshops, so if you need to get into some problem solving that's really specific to your needs and what you're designing now, this is a fantastic time to engage the Mott engineers on site at your facility. So you can inquire at info@mottcorp.com. Really exciting workshops. So let's go ahead and jump right into the webinar. So first, we're going to cover some filtration basics and go a little bit more into detail. So Al and Chris, do you guys want to start with talk about the applications and criteria to design your next filter?
Sure, Sean. Some of the basic design criteria that we look for and that we work with for designing up a filter would be material compatibility, looking at particle size distribution of the product we're trying to filter. We're looking at filtration efficiencies and how we're trying to capture those. And then obviously flow rate and pressure drop are things we get from our customers to help us determine which size we need. So here's our gas and liquid filtration particle capture efficiency chart. What this does is give someone a way to take a look and decide what media grade they would be suitable for their application based on the kind of particles they're trying to capture. There's one for gas and there's one for liquid.
As far as how customers perceive filtration, do you encounter customers that don't always know there's multiple ways to filter particulate beyond just sieving?
Yeah, that is the case. Most people think sieving is the only method of particle capture. That is actually the case in liquid filtration applications, but in gas filtration, there are many more particle capture mechanisms at play. And this chart here, or this visual here, shows the various particle capture mechanisms that are at play in a gas filtration application. Just some of them, for example, interception. That's basically when a particle keeps going through the media until it actually hits something. And interception is shown twice because that interception may happen close to the surface or away from the surface. But the point here is that these particle capture efficiencies that are at play in gas filtration involve capturing the particulates within the media and not at the surface, which is the case with sieving and in liquid applications.
And a lot of these mechanisms are particle size dependent, correct? And that relates to the different efficiencies?
That's right. Basically, different mechanisms are prominent with regard to particle size. In this particular plot, for example, we see that the diffusion capture mechanism is dominant when it comes to the smaller particle sizes, less than 1 micron. And then other things like sieving become more important with bigger particles, 1 micron and bigger.
Very interesting, and I imagine that's very application specific as well. So looking at the next phase, flow control basics. So we've covered a little bit of the filtration basics. Now let's move on to flow control. Several different things to factor in here when we design for proper flow control.
So some of the things we're looking for when we're designing for flow control is you want laminar flow. You're looking for accuracy and repeatability. And you want your hardware and your materials to be compatible with your fittings and your piping system. A couple different methods of doing or having flow control, one being an orifice and two being a porous metal restrictor. One of the big advantages to a porous metal restrictor is that if you did have any kind of contaminant and you were to plug one pore, the product would still be able to flow through there. Whereas an orifice, having just one hole, if something were to plug that hole, you would start to cut off the amount of gas that could go through that restrictor. So one of the big advantages there is the ability to have a restrictor, a metal restrictor, flow continuously, even if you do have some contaminants in the system.
And probably a lot of what we see in the flow control applications is it's very critical, right? So these people are sticking them in their systems, and it's there. Like a customer can't just pull these flow restrictors out. They're relying on this to work for months to years at a time, right?
Very true, Sean. And they are very critical applications, and they put them into service. And once they're in there, they do work for very long periods of time with very good reliability. Okay,
great. So I imagine the multi-pore feature in the porous metal restrictors is pretty important for stuff like longevity and customization.
Very much so.
Moving on to our last major discussion today around flame arresting applications. So flame arresting is actually quite a bit different than filtration and flow control. Al and Chris, do you want to give a brief overview of how flame arresters work?
Sure. Basically, in a flame arresting application, you have a situation where you have some sort of electronic device. It could be a sensor, for example, in an environment where that sensor is trying to detect for hazardous or flammable gases. Of course, if there is an issue where the flammable gas is exposed to the circuitry of the electronics, you run the risk of an explosion. And the porous metal flame arrestor is used to make sure that if there is that issue, that the flame does not propagate outside of the sensor enclosure. Basically, what happens is the porous metal is, because it is metal, it has high heat conductivity, and that quenches the flame front so that it does not go out of the enclosure but stays within it and protects whatever may be in the environment of the detector.
Yep, that sounds like some of the design elements here are going to be pretty critical.
They're very critical. In fact, a lot of design work needs to be done in with consultation with flame arrestor experts.
So as far as designing your flame arrestor, there seems like a lot of criteria to factor in, and as well as specifically regulatory criteria where, the stringency here is you don't want to have to do this twice through regulators, right? Right.
There's very stringent design qualifications and validation after the part has been designed, and this all is done with against rigorous standards.
And one of the things with respect to the design of flame arrestors is, when you look at other technologies out on the market today, whether it's woven wire screens or beveled sheets combined, we can actually achieve a pretty small footprint as well as hitting all regulatory aspects of being a flame arrestor with our designs. Do you see that with some customers, the ability to design a fairly high flow small element that's a pretty economic design when people build flame arrestors through Mott?
That is the case. Customers are often interested in a smaller footprint. The nice thing about ours too is that it can be designed with such a shape that the customer can put their sensor, electronic sensor, within the porous metal media if it, for example, is in the shape of a cup. So it does offer that convenience to the customer.
Okay, great. So next we're going to go over a little bit of the basics on porous metal capability and how this technology comes together to form these different applications. So first we want to look at what is porous metal. We've been doing this for the last 60 years. Al and Chris, do you want to give us just a quick overview of how porous metal comes together to form these products?
So we start with irregular shaped powder. We take that powder and we semi-compress it so that those edges of the powder stick together and give you a semi-compressed green state product. From there, that product is sintered. In the sintering process, those edges that were held together in the green state are fully connected, and then you have a rigid structure like you would any other stainless type product. We go ahead and test each one of those for the bubble point to determine that we have the correct pore size for that structure we were shooting for, and we have a range from 0.1 to 100 as our media grade that we offer.
That speaks pretty well to customization and the ability to pretty much address any application that comes our way.
It does carry a wide range, and so it does cover a large range of applications in all kinds of markets.
Sure. And being that we've done this for 60 years, we're used in some of the most rigorous applications. I can't think of an application we've done in the past that wasn't mission critical. Starting with the microelectronics industry, manufacturing semiconductor chips, primarily focusing on pipe purity gas filtration. We're also involved in very large process system filtration systems in the energy and industrial sector, down to very, very high pure healthcare implants and various medical and analytical equipment for stuff like drug discovery and drug delivery applications. And the primary focus in the applications today are more in the OEM industrial sector, where we customize these to the various manufacturing and instrumentation sectors, as well as aerospace, defense, and food and beverage. Can you just, Alan, Chris, can you guys just give us a brief overview of, why people tend to choose porous metal over other materials like plastics and, even sometimes ceramics or various cloth materials when they go to make a decision?
Well, in the case of plastics, there's usually a temperature limit that they can go to, maybe 400 degrees Fahrenheit. And above that, you really need to get into metals if you're concerned about heat resistance. The other thing, too, is metal compared to plastic is stronger media. And so that gives you the ability to, for example, back pulse our media with a high pressure. Back pulsing is where you reverse the flow at a high pressure to clean the filter. So you can do that without taking the element out. So that offers convenience to our customers. Now, ceramics can be used at even higher temperatures than metals, but often the problem with them is that they are quite brittle. And so to the extent that it can, porous metal will be used even in high temperature applications as well.
To go along with what Chris is saying, I think some of the other things that customers have commented on are our tight tolerances, our longevity for a product, and really to be able to customize it, right? To be able to make that filter into something that they need in terms of a shape or a specific format. Exactly,
and I think some of that customization. We use the term unlimited, and it's literally unlimited. We're probably at tens of thousands of different options available, and that's just the last couple decades. So when you look at customization, customers typically come to us with all different sets of hardware requirements. We talked a little bit about the media grades, the material requirements. How much of this do you see, and just do you have some feedback on the level of customization that Mott does to meet some of these customer applications?
So I think the level of customization is quite high. Almost every application is slightly different, and everyone wants something just slightly different in their product that goes along with their application. So I think the customization level is quite high. In regards to alloys and different types of materials, to customize even further, we have worked in all of these: stainless, Hastelloy, Inconel, Monel, titanium. So I think it just speaks to the amount of customization that we do for our products and the wide range we're capable of.
Yeah, and probably the only thing I'd add is if you don't see something we have available today, we often work with customers to develop the next generation thing. Whether it's a new material, there's specific applications we apply coatings to our product. And there's actually new applications we end up coming up with for how to use the base technology beyond these standard applications. So pretty exciting stuff. And we'll talk a little bit later about the next generation capabilities coming out. So why don't we get a little specific and talk about some of the applications in filtration, flow, and flame arresting that are happening in the world today. So if you look, a lot of the world's greatest trends, related to keeping our environment clean and people safe, the world's not, getting any less populated, and we're constantly having to put more demands on our global resources. So people are struggling to catch up with that, as well as keep up with new regulations for the environment. So if you look at emissions control, we do quite a bit of gas stack analyzers and filtration, as well as specific sampling filters we'll talk about. The whole Internet of Things revolution, things are becoming more automated, more digital. So we're spending a lot of time in sensor protection. And not every environment is this nice, clean. You kind of think of your food and beverage line where everything's clean and the environment is open atmosphere. A lot of what makes the world tick is actually very harsh environments. So we'll talk a little bit about gas detectors. And one of the biggest thing is, human safety in all of this. So knowing when something bad could happen, like detecting a leak, is critically important. And all of these things rely on a porous metal product that's robust enough to handle those applications, as well as ensure they operate properly. The worst thing engineers want to have is bad data being fed to them. So, and this keeps everything on track. So let's dive into our first application. Al, why don't we review our first application, the gas stack sampling filter?
So this is a gas stack sampling filter used in a gas stack. This would be sampling the gas coming out of the stack and being drawn off to an analyzer. This allows particulates to be in that gas stream, but still allows us to draw off the gas and get into an analyzer to analyze what is actually happening with that gas. They come in different configurations. They show a few up on the screen there, but they're used quite often and very successful out in the field.
Yep, and that's an interesting one. Like, this is directly tied to companies being able to hit the new regulatory standards as they go, right?
That's correct. They can sample continuously, on demand, whatever required by their systems.
Yeah, so we definitely see that on the rise. So our next application, extremely critical. Chris commented on this earlier around the idea of electronics could potentially cause an explosion. Chris, do you want to dive into this application?
Sure. As I mentioned before, our flame arresters are typically used where you have a sensor with electronics in it operating in a potentially hazardous environment. If it's a hazardous gas, for example, the electronics could potentially ignite that hazardous gas if it's flammable, and that could cause obviously a big issue. But the safety factor of the porous metal is that it contains the explosion within the sensor enclosure, so that there is no threat to the surrounding environment. Again, the porous metal is used to quench the flame front, to contain the explosion, and to provide safety to all that may be in the surrounding environment.
And Chris, is there any warm and fuzzy you can give the engineers who design these types of components, who know they're facing the big UL or ATEX directives or significant qualification periods ahead of them, that porous metal will work in these flame arresting applications?
Well, they've been in service now for decades, at least 50 years. One of our biggest customers has been using these successfully now for 45 years, and they're used in a refinery, and the flame arrestor is part of a sensor that continuously detects for hydrogen sulfide, which is a very flammable gas. And there have been a number of case studies where there was an issue, very few, but the porous metal did its job. It contained the explosion and did not result in a much bigger newsworthy issue.
Exactly, and I do know of several new applications for specific inline piping as well in some of these areas. When you have an inline flame arrestor, I'll comment on one quick trend before we move to the next application, that I do see a lot of customers moving to finer and finer detection limits. So it's actually an important design consideration to look at the absorption of that potential thing you're trying to sample into the media before it hits your detector, whichever mode you're operating, catalytic bead or the like. So all important design considerations we factor into when we do flame arresters here at Mott. And the last application, ideally, protecting your expensive pump, might seem like a simple application, but there's actually a lot of complex design considerations here. Al and Chris, do you want to dive into this one?
Yeah, sure. Often the customer is concerned that there is particulates flowing into machinery, and the problem with these particulates is that they can wear down and even ruin seals. So customers often come to us for an inline filter that can be mounted easily, and just to protect the bearing surfaces, the seals from particulates. And the The particular filter that's shown in the slide right now is very convenient. Not only can it be mounted inline, but it can be disassembled, and the cup-like filter can be easily removed and another one put in its place. So that's convenience, and that's also protecting equipment that can be very expensive if you have to break it down to repair or replace seals.
Exactly, and anytime you're down, the throughput of between a power plant or a factory or manufacturing process is critical. So next, we want to take a look at some of the next generation developments that are happening. Probably one of the most impactful of ones is 3D printing. Picture the concept of either your filter flow control device or flame arrestor, and going from a multiple component, sometimes 5, 7, 10-piece bill of material into one, where what Mott is doing is we're actually printing the porous as well as the solid into an integrated component at multiple porosities. So do you guys want to give just a quick review of, what are some of the benefits of this technology and, what you can imagine?
Sure, Sean, I'll take this one. One of the big advantages of 3D printing is that limitations of traditional pressing of porous are really stripped away. You're able to print basically anything you can think of. The shape now becomes limitless on what you can and what you can print. Along with that is that you're able to print the solid hardware at the same time, so you eliminate the welding or any kind of joints, and it's a homogeneous product. Really, what it gives you is the ability to print something without having to do any secondary operations to it. In terms of the porous itself, you get a much more uniform density to give you more repeatability and better flow.
Yeah, a lot of that comes from uniformity, where you don't have to press in an iso press or fill a die and then press and sinter, right? It's just laser bed, and that's where you eliminate some of those density gradients that you might see conventionally.
That's exactly right. On a traditional method, using a press, you're filling a cavity and squeezing. You're going to get some small differences as you section through that. But 3D printing would not be the case with that, right? When you're 3D printing, every layer, every section is the same as the one before it.
Yeah, so really exciting across all the industries, the potential and some of the applications we're dealing with here. On the next slide, there's one of the key points, especially with 3D printing, but all our technology, is the idea of looking at it, simulating things on the computer using computational fluid dynamics, where it can actually save you a lot of time versus doing a host of prototypes trying to find the right way, via guess, test, and revise. And one of the important things this actually highlights is if you look at our 3D printing capability, we can expand to all different kinds of fluidic applications. In the picture here, this is our static mixer technology, where we design for most efficient mixing in a host of different internal volumes and residence times. But do you guys have any comments on the computer fluid dynamics simulation and kind of what it can do for customers?
So really what it does here is it gives the customer the ability to simulate a process without having to actually make a part and put it into application, right? It gives them the ability to go through and simulate those parameters and determine what the outcome would be, and to use that information to direct the direction they're going to go in terms of a prototype or a direction for the production product, something along those lines.
Okay, great. And this is a good tie-in. So, Mott has developed a new customer innovation center that allows us to work one-on-one, where customers can come on site and actually design and rapid prototype anything they're looking to build. Mott is a company that, likes to work engineer to engineer, where we get on a whiteboard and design what you need and really think creatively about the solution and how we can address it. Is there any specific feedback or experiences you guys want to share about working with customers in the Customer Innovation Center?
There's been a number of instances now where customers have taken advantage of what we offer through the Customer Innovation Center, and this advantage that they've gotten from what they've learned is help with their design and also understanding the limitations and the advantages of porous metal to a better degree so that they can incorporate these things into their design. And once they come up with design, and once, with in conjunction with our help, we can turn that design into a prototype rather quickly, and that enables the next stage of testing, validation, and from there, there's more possibilities, enhancements to the design. New materials can be, we can make another prototype with different material, for example, or add, design subtleties that'll improve the overall performance of the product.
Great. And, one additional point I want to share based on what you just said is a lot of times customers can then take that data to go bring back to their management teams or their engineering leadership to help them make a decision, whether they're facing a large CapEx, capital expenditure to proceed to the next step, or if they, have to lock into the design and components. That's always a difficult time for an engineer, and you want to make sure it's right. So they can actually leave here with a data package on, the various testing we've done on the product. The only other point is, we're starting to offer memberships to this Customer Innovation Center. So if customers, have multiple projects throughout the year, or they definitively know they need some engineering help throughout the year, they can apply and get a membership at the Customer Innovation Center. All right, so just final wrap up. Hopefully you've gotten some new information and learned a little bit about filtration, flow, and flame arresting basics today. If you'd like to get more information on anything you heard, again, please feel free to ask questions. And through June, we're having free on-site technical workshops for customers who qualify. And if you want to check that out, contact a Mott representative. We're happy to send our engineers on-site to you where we can go through your different applications and projects. Just a quick reminder, everything that's involved. So, we obviously have a team of experts in filtration and flow applications. We're happy to do training. We're happy to do problem solving. And probably one of the most effective things is we break out in one-on-one sessions with your engineers to actually solve problems in work design. We're happy to be there as your resource. Feel free to use info@mottcorp.com to send in any inquiries on workshops. So with that, thanks everyone for attending. Special thank you to Chris and Al. Your expertise is pretty awesome. Any final words for the viewers today?
No, nothing here.
Okay, great. All right, guys. This was really exciting. Thank you very much. Hope you found it valuable.